You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 16th of December 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme, can and should Europe stand up to Donald Trump? That is the question being asked by my first two guests, who argue that the continent can do a better job of setting itself apart from Washington, D.C. After that, Carlotta Rebello joins me right here in the studio. And Carlotta, you have news from the world of transportation.
Absolutely, Chris. You can now take a train all the way from London into the Alps. Spain wants to reveal a new national pass to take trains. And would you replace your commute with a cable car?
Maybe. I love cable cars, ferries. Count me on for that Alpine train as well. Thank you, Carlotta. After that, it is nearing the Christmas holidays. And if you need any more gift ideas, Hassan Anderson will be joining me with some top design gifts. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Welcome to this Tuesday edition of The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Hope your week is shaping up well. Another week, another round of talks between the US and Ukraine that have left Europe largely on the sidelines. It is a pattern that my first two guests have analysed in the upcoming January-February edition of Foreign Affairs magazine. It's entitled How Europe Lost, exploring the continent's rather submissive reaction to a year of the Trump administration in the worlds of defense, trade, and values. Well, I'm joined now by the authors, Matthias Matthijs, Senior Fellow for Europe at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, and by Natalie Tocci, Director of the Institute of International Affairs in Italy. Great to have you both on the show. And Matthias, I wanted to start with you and the premise of this article before we get into any specific examples. This idea that Europe has sought to appease rather than confront Trump or show strategic autonomy. I mean, this has been in many ways a story, a global phenomenon. But Matthias, perhaps you could outline the uniquely European characteristics to it first.
Yes, excellent question. So what's unique about Europe, of course, is that it's dependent for its security on the United States, which is obviously not the case for a country like China. But while it's dependent on the United States for defense, it's supposedly an equal when it comes to in economic or trade terms, right? And so I think the biggest surprise maybe was not appeasement on the security side, given the importance of U.S. support in Ukraine. But what's more surprising is European appeasement on the trade side, as well as on the value side. I mean, after all, the European Union is all about democracy, rule of law, and so on. They've been very comfortable preaching this all over the world since the 1990s. And that's something they've been, very quiet on. And I think it's especially because they hope that by being quiet, they can, kind of calm the waters, the transatlantic waters, and get the US to stay involved in other things and avoiding from things getting worse.
Natalie, to bring you in on that, I mean, this appeasement that Matthias is describing there on trade in particular, it's not just due to Donald Trump. It is also due to domestic forces, perhaps on the values side as well, trying to placate the far right. The situation is very different, of course, in every European country. But from where you sit in Italy, or as an Italian in particular, what do you make of Giorgia Meloni? Because she's played a very central role in all of this, sort of an appeaser as well, or an arbiter between Trump and the other European leaders?
Well, I think there was the hope that she could be an arbiter, and the reality is now emerging in full force that she's actually far more of an appeaser. And I think this kind of brings out a contradiction that Matthias and I talk about in the article. What I mean by this is that whereas at the beginning of Trump's administration, there was indeed the hope that there could be some useful whisperers, and the likes of Giorgia Meloni, but also Alex Stubb, were identified as potential whisperers. And this was still the moment in which, indeed, there was the hope, or perhaps the illusion, that somehow Trump could be brought on to the European side, be it on the war on Ukraine, or be it as far as sort of coming to a reasonable deal on trade. As it has turned out, it's clear that bargain has not quite worked, and that basically what we are therefore seeing is that the likes of Meloni are not, in fact, useful whisperers. They have ended up being appeasers. We're seeing this, by the way, now, even as we approach a crucial decision in Europe as far as the use of Russian frozen assets is concerned. And who is standing out against this? Not only Belgium, which of course has, in a sense, some legitimate concerns there, given that it is where most of these assets are held, but Italy, right? And why is Italy doing this? Well, not so much because it's Putin friendly, but because she's Trump friendly. And of course, the minute in which Trump is friendly with Putin, you end up with a total short circuit here. Now, where I see the paradox, or rather where Matthias and I see the paradox, is that ultimately you see this appeasement, presumably by nationalist leaders, right? And therefore you have nationalist leaders that are actually pursuing the cause of foreign powers, in this case, the United States of America, which kind of points to an interesting paradox. But rather than this weakening them, it risks actually strengthening them further.
Matthias, talk a little more about that paradox, because I do find it fascinating if you look at the way that European leaders have dealt with Trump, but also how the far right has dealt with Trump, or even for Europe. There's been some shifting in their positions, whether that's due to Trump or Ukraine, less talk of abandoning the European project altogether, which does just lead me to wonder, hypothetically, how different the relationship would be with the US if, say, Jordan Bardella was in France, Alice Weidel in Germany, Nigel Farage in the UK.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So the obvious contradiction of the last year is that the UK made a very quick bargain, right, with Keir Starmer on the trade front, and that actually was a better deal than the EU did. So if you're a Eurosceptic, you point to this. Doesn't necessarily mean you want to follow the UK and leave, but you could say, what's the point of the European Union if we can't get a better deal as the United Kingdom? That's just one example. The problem with the far right, of course, is there's no such thing as a nationalist international, right? I mean, they are all over the place. I mean, actually, the French leaders of the far right are very kind of distancing themselves from Trump because it doesn't play out in a domestic scene. Trump is not popular at all. They're also torn over their support for Russia, right? I mean, the most obvious gap is between the far right in Poland and the far right in Hungary, where in Hungary they're outright appeasing of Putin, just want to end the war no matter what the territorial costs or consequences are for Ukraine, which is of course not the case at all for Poland. But so the tragedy here is, because of the weakness of the centrist politicians that are mostly in charge all over Europe, they feel the need to appease Donald Trump because of economic costs, because of security costs in the short term. But it's not and the far right is pushing them to do this, but it's not the far right that is paying the political price here, right? Because they're the ones that seem strengthened. Why? Because Trump's policies and Trump's approach seems somewhat effective when it comes to dealing with immigration, when it comes to dealing with trade. Where they are torn is what this all means for security and in Ukraine, right? Because it's not, on the one hand, they want peace, some of them, but on the other hand, they also don't want a strengthened Russia and a weakened Europe coming out of this. So that's a very interesting question. If you were to have a far-right Europe, if that would be a Trump-friendly Europe or not.
Natalie, to bring you in on that, I mean, one of the interesting aspects of perhaps why this has been as successful for the far right in Europe is that Europe was behind on a lot of this, which made it harder for them to stand on their own 2 feet against Donald Trump. On European defense, obviously, they were not spending enough. Perhaps if they had been spending more, they would have been in a better position to negotiate with Trump. And similarly on the economy is not doing so well, even if it is a big economy. So I'm just curious if you get the sense that maybe if Europe had handled its own problems better earlier, that would have given them a better negotiating position now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. Although what I also think is that our main problem before even getting to a policy conversation, before getting to the sort of material conditions, be they economic or defense related, is actually psychological. In a sense, the problem that we have in Europe is assuming that we simply cannot survive without the United States. It's a sort of sense of learned helplessness that we've developed over the course of many decades. And yes, you're absolutely right. There are all sorts of things that we should be doing and should have done in terms of defense, in terms of competitiveness. And yet, and I don't mean to say what I'm about to say to sort of diminish the importance of this, but I do think it's notable that you kind of go elsewhere in the world and you see countries which are way smaller, way weaker, and actually also extremely dependent on the United States, that seem to have far more agency, far more autonomy of thought, right? Before you even get to the possibility of having autonomy in action. And I feel that unless we as Europeans make that mental switch, we're actually not going to do what it takes, even if we develop defense capacities, even if we acquire greater competitiveness. I think it's a sort of mental switch that we need to make, which is the necessary condition for all sorts of action that needs to follow.
Just finally on that point, is there another country that you would highlight that has done this better, that has done what you want Europe to do? Matthias?
I would add to what Natalie just said is that there is no great desire amongst the European population at large to become a superpower, right? I mean, you ask this in the United States, do you want to be number one? The vast majority would say absolutely. You'd ask this to the Chinese, they would say the same thing. Europe is actually fairly comfortable not competing at that level, as long as it doesn't have dire consequences. I mean, I would say the Chinese have used their leverage tremendously well. And they've learned from Trump 1.0 that, all Trump understands is real leverage. That's something I think the Europeans could have learned a lot better. But you're right, the ones that's struggling are the democratic treaty allies of the United States, from Canada to Korea to Japan to the Europeans have had the hardest time. You could say that to some extent the UK has maybe played it slightly better. They've gotten sort of better results. They're getting less pressure, but there's enormous pressure on the UK as well on the domestic side, right? And that's something that we've seen much more of in the last few weeks. And what worries me, if you listen to Friedrich Merz's latest statements, is that there is now a nationalist reflex, even amongst the mainstream politicians, who say, well, Trump doesn't like the European Union, fine, but maybe he'll like the individual countries of Europe, and maybe that's then what we should focus on, which is probably exactly not what we need right now.
Matthias Matisse of the Council on Foreign Relations and Natalie Tocci of the Institute of International Affairs in Italy. Thank you both very much for joining us. Their article, How Europe Lost, is in the January-February 2026 edition of Foreign Affairs magazine. Now here's Tom Webb with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. The US has offered Ukraine NATO-style guarantees amid ongoing talks to end Russia's invasion. President Trump said peace negotiations are closer now than they've ever been, though Kyiv refuses to concede territory and Moscow has not agreed to any recent changes to a deal. Volkswagen will end production at its plant in Dresden. The move marks the first time the German automaker has shut a plant in its home country. The closure comes as European car makers face weaker demand and soaring US tariffs. Incheon International Airport announced its revenue has almost returned to pre-pandemic levels amid record international passenger traffic. The South Korean airport is now eyeing record revenues for next year. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Tom. And it is time now for a roundup of stories from the world of transportation, European transportation to be exact. And for that, I'm joined by Carlotta Rebello, Monocle Radio's executive producer and producer of the Urbanist podcast. senior foreign correspondent, regular traveller, user of European transportation. Is that
just
fair?
Keep going, Chris. Keep going. You still have time.
Which one should we start with? Well, we're going to start with some Alpine fun because I do like this. This is a tradition that we're talking about here.
Yes.
Eurostar to the Alps.
Yes, it is the Eurostar Snow, which is back, which we weren't sure whether or not this would return, but it has been unveiled that the service connecting St. Pancras International here in London to Bourg-Saint-Maurice in France, in the French Alps, will be back in service for another year. The first trip will be on December 20th and it'll run all the way up until April the 4th. Now, it is important to note that is one change that is part of the service. It's not the same seamless train all the way from London, but it will take you all the way to Lille and then you'll be able to swap trains. There will be a special Alpine service departing St. Pancras every Saturday at 9:01 a.m. So, yeah, it's exciting news.
It is exciting news. I'm going to say on a personal note, I'm sad it goes to France and not, say, to Austria. But, you know, they can work on that. I do understand there's also going to be Eurostar to Germany at some point. So that's, you know,
yes.
something.
Next year is going to be a big year, not just for the Eurostar, but for the Channel Tunnel, as we will know for sure which other companies will also enter into service. But, yes, Eurostar announced earlier this season in November that trains to Germany are in the works. So very exciting news for train lovers.
There are some exciting times, and do take the train to the Alps. It's a fun way to get there as well. Let's move on to Spain. We have a nationwide public transport pass. Tell us about that.
Yes, so staying sort of related to train news, but Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez this week unveiled this initiative, and this is a national public transport pass that will cost a monthly fee of €60, and it will allow people to travel anywhere in the country by bus or train. Now, important to say, it excludes the high-speed services, but you can still take any of the other train services, and in certain cities includes the metro and local buses too. Pedro Sánchez, when announcing the measure, mentioned, of course, other cities and nations in Europe that have had similar programs, and Germany being one of them, that this was the inspiration. And it was really nice to hear him say that the intention behind this is that he wants to change the way Spaniards understand and use public transport forever. And being from Portugal, I really kind of understood the subtlety of what he's trying to allude to there, which is not really the case in much of Europe, but particularly in Spain and in Portugal, there is still this idea of maybe a bit of shame with using public transport. It's kind of, you can't afford a car, therefore you take the bus. And we know, of course, that is not reality, but it is not just an effort of changing access, but of changing mentalities too. So Portugal had a similar move earlier last year with the Passe Verde, which is the green pass, where for €40 they could take trains in the country, €40 per month, and there was an unlimited number of trains, but you could take several trains in the country. And it really has change the way people engage with public transport. So it is part of this from Pedro Sánchez to see him bringing this transport pass really is a way of maybe starting to change mentalities. And if more people are drawn to public transport, you will get more investment. Everything starts to trickle down. And it's important to say it is €60, but for those under 26, it is €30.
That is really surprising to hear about. I have to say that in Spain and Portugal, there would be that sort of stigma attached to public transport. It's something you hear in the US, frankly,
Absolutely.
a bit more, but not necessarily in Europe.
Yes, it's very rare for Europe. And I'm not saying it's as bad as it is in the US. As you know, I was based in Los Angeles for a bit. And, I remember some of my friends saying I was crazy for wanting to take the metro or walking somewhere. It's not as bad as that. But there's still definitely this idea that why are you not driving there? So it is important to change this. And in Spain, being such a huge nation, allowing people to move more freely within the country at the flat fee of €60 can be quite life-changing. Not just about getting to know different parts of the country, particularly Spain, which has very strong independent identities in different regions, but also it unlocks so much opportunity and jobs and ability to go to university. So it will be really exciting to see next year. This will come into effect in the spring of 2026. Actually, how many people will take this up?
We will see what happens with that. Let's move on to one final story from the Paris region. another cable car as a public transport option.
You wouldn't associate Paris with cable cars. Well, you will now, because this is the longest urban cable car in Europe, and it is in Paris. So this is in the southeastern suburbs of Paris, and it's called the C1 line in the Limay-Brévannes region. And what I found extraordinary is that this 4.5 kilometer route is going to take about 18 minutes to do from one end to the other. But the average traffic, how long it would take you to drive the same length or take a bus the same length, is nearly 45 to 50 minutes. So it will halve commute so much for passengers that this is why they created it. It's going to be a game changer. The cable car will carry around 11,000 passengers per day. It has 105 gondolas, with each of them can take 10 seated passengers. So yeah, it has a few stops along the way, so that you don't have to do just from one end to the other. There's 2 stops along the way, and yeah, it's incredible, and it will connect this otherwise isolated neighborhood to Paris Metro as well. So again, we're talking about unlocking connectivity, unlocking opportunity for people who right now fall outside of the public transport system.
I am a huge fan of alternative forms of public transport. Have you taken the cable car here in London?
I have, actually. I have twice. Once for, I guess, pleasure, just to see what it was all about. And the second time because I was at a venue on the other side, and it was much easier to avoid everything to cross over using the cable car. And it's a nice way of experiencing a city that we've often talked about as an example of successful cable cars is La Paz, where it connected this neighborhood that was way up high to the city downtown, whereas before it was again a nearly 1 hour commute, and this has really changed it. I just have one last bit of information, Chris, that officials said when announcing the inauguration of this cable car in Paris. It cost 138 million euros, and officials said that it was cheaper than to build a new subway line.
Well, that kind of makes sense. Carlotta Rebello, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing. I'm Chris Chermak, and now, given that we are just about a week away from Christmas, and many of our listeners still need to get down to the shops to find that perfect present for mom, dad, partner, anyone else in the family, we're going to be helping you out with a few more ideas today. And for that, I am joined by Monocle Radio producer of Monocle on Design, Hassan Anderson, and the host and Monocle's design editor, Nick Manise. Good to have you both here. You've brought props, I believe.
Well, not just props, presents for you, Chris.
I know. I also just want to say,
presents.
you mentioned there that if people are looking for who to get presents for, mum, dad, partners, I will also take presents from listeners anywhere in the world, mail them to Midori House. You can find our address on the website. I just want that up front. Well, this is exactly
Nick.
it. This is exactly it.
I mean, we know you're shameless.
But
so
no, but
that's
this is
okay.
it. This is why I feel like this is a big part of being design editor. I like shiny things.
You like getting
I like talking about shiny things, and I also like receiving shiny things. So this is it. Or not shiny, it can also be matte. Really, whatever kind of texture you want, as long as it's a present.
Hassan, I have to bring you in on this because you are now the producer of Monocle on Design. Have you gotten any shiny things, or has Nick stolen them all away from you?
I haven't got any shiny things materially speaking, but in terms of ideas,
So he has
concepts,
taken-
discussions, there's a lot of shiny things going on.
That's a huge compliment, and I really appreciate that, because I've been talking about materiality, but you're talking about my soul and my brain, and that is wonderful. I assume.
Wow.
You
was
didn't
very
specifically
nice.
say me, but that's what I'm getting
No,
from
it was,
this.
of course, the subtext was this is Nick's doing.
But mostly Grace Charlton, who's sadly not here. at
Well,
this
I mean,
moment, but is
otherwise she'd
obviously
take the shiny things, because we do have gifts in front of you.
We do. So maybe we should move on to the gifts. Although I did want to ask just where you both are with your Christmas shopping before that. How are we doing? Hassan, have you managed to?
The usual routine has taken place, which is for me to leave everything till last minute. But I put a lot of thought in it, in that small minute that I've left myself.
Okay,
So,
you always
know,
put,
a maximum effort with minimum prep is usually
That's
my
quite
approach.
good. That's quite good. No, I've
Are you
nailed it.
taking
I'm done.
lessons?
I'm
You're
sorted.
actually done.
Yeah.
Wow,
I
okay.
hey, actually, you know what? I realised I like getting gifts. I also like giving them. So this is it. And this is what we're doing right now.
Okay,
So, Chris,
this is what we're doing.
just to
yes.
preface this, we've got the receipts for all these gifts, and you need to decide. You need to give us your reaction to what you think about them, and decide whether you're going to keep or return.
And to be clear,
Is that it? It's sort of-
Has
this is like a
bought
game
these.
show.
I
Has
bought these,
these.
and they actually sort of do resemble my approach to wrapping generally. So
Oh wow! Okay, amazing. Yes, they are. So I get to play like a game show here. Keep or return.
yeah, exactly.
Is
That's
that what
right.
we're talking? Okay. What have I opened first of all here? It is a special coffee.
It's
Mocha pot.
Who was going to go there? It's not just any mocha pot, Hassan. You pointed this out to me. It's the turbo mocha pot. I mean, this is
Turbo. I mean, it has this
incredibly
look
exciting.
below. I don't know how we can describe the way this looks.
It's
but
almost like a turbine. So it's your kind of classic mocha pot. You feel like I feel like you're.
No,
ready
you
to
hit
describe it.
you hit the nail on the head. It's inspired by jet engines, the design, and that's
Jet
because
engine mocha pot.
because it claims to half the time it takes to make a mocha coffee, which is around 6 to 7 minutes on average. I use a mocha pot at home a lot. Big coffee drinker, as is everyone on the Monocle Radio team and Monocle in general. But making them at home in a mocha pot is, I think, unparalleled. It's the best way to drink a coffee. This will cut the time down because often you can risk burning the coffee by, a watch pot never boils, that phrase. You take your eye off the hob, and then before you know it, your coffee's ruined.
Especially in the mornings when you're a bit sleepy and you just need that first coffee, but then it's not ready yet, so then you wander off and then you just forget about it because you're
All of a sudden,
tired.
the flat's burnt down. Who knows what's going on? But what I do like about this is like a beautiful marriage of form and function. So the turbine design comes from the idea of increasing surface area, so there's better heat absorption. I had to Google that. I failed physics in high school, but I understand the idea. But what I also like is it's quite a dramatic take on the traditional mocha pot design. And what I do like is, I guess, pulling inspiration from different things. So the original mocha pot was invented in 1933 by Alfonso Bialetti. That's why, everyone knows the Bialetti mocha pot.
Of course.
But it was inspired by not only washing machines of the era, but the silhouette of his wife, which I just think is...
Wow.
I read that too, and I wasn't sure. Is it that it resembles, or was it actually inspired by...
It's inspired by her. That's the handle is about her hand on her hip. It's the broad shoulders. And it's which I guess he was proud of and into. And hey, I'm here for it. You know what I mean? But it also comes in. This is now getting a bit weird. It's got this beautiful waist. It's got this beautiful waist. Oh, I just want to dance with it. I think. Have I dug myself out? I don't really know.
And now the new designer Matteo Frontini has come along and been like, forget the wife, jet engines.
Yeah, boys. That's where we're going with this.
I feel like we need to move on here before we dig ourselves into further holes. Maybe I need to open the second one. A watch.
Well, it's not just any watch, is it,
Not
Chris?
just any watch.
It's
What
not
are we-
just
what are we
any
actually
watch.
talking
You could
about
at least
here?
feign surprise. And
But Chris, this
I'm
is a
just
very,
curious. You need
very
to explain
expensive
this
watch,
to
and
me.
you've
Okay.
opened it with zero excitement and enthusiasm, which is devastating.
I need an
It's a luxury
explanation.
watch,
A
Chris.
luxury watch.
It's
a special luxury watch.
It's
What am
by
I?
Resance, which is an amazing Belgian brand. And what I really like
How
about
thoughtful to go with my Belgian.
well, this is
where I
exactly
grew
the
up
logic
as well.
behind it. Again,
You
I
kind
wish
of thought-
I could take credit for it, but this is all coming from Haas. But we
Don't picture
featured
this, Chris.
we just remember him truly.
I do have the receipt though. So
We spoke to Benoit, the founder of the brand, on Monocle on Design, and what for me, this is about the stories behind an object. And what I really like about this is, you're looking at a watch, but you're also looking at a new way of thinking. His whole idea was reconceptualizing the way that we tell time on our wrists. We're not being constrained by here with this design. It's an oil-filled casing. It's got separate orbital dials to make it easier to read. So you've got a minute hand and an hour hand, and they kind of rotate through the day. It's all about legibility.
It's all becoming understandable now.
yeah,
with its
this
two
is exactly
hands.
it.
Yeah.
And it's design led. And what I really like is they were like, well, actually, we design watches, wrist watches, often based off technology from the 19th and 20th century. We've evolved so much technologically. Why not re-examine the way that we design our watches? It is reinventing the wheel, and I actually think they've done a beautiful job of it. Haas?
yeah, agreed. And I think I would direct you to one of the latest episodes of Monocle on Design. On the 4th of November, we actually interviewed the CEO and the designer, Benoit, and his philosophy on how he approached this object is fascinating. He started with the idea that if someone came along to him and said, could you invent me a timepiece for the wrist without knowledge of a watch ever existing, this seemingly finished design object, what would it look like? And he came up with this. And it's just a fascinating attempt to design something that seems like it's completely finished. And then the result is this.
Not inspired by his wife either. So this is a little bit different. But God,
I think we have to move away.
It'd be lovely to have some curves on that, wouldn't it?
Oh my, I do think it would be interesting because you'd have to like, even though it would be interesting, like restarting a watch and kind of how you think about it. It means you'd have to shift your brain a little bit, but I find that interesting.
We could go to the last one.
We can go to the last one before we finish this show. I'm pulling out the last one.
No,
here.
actually, this is the last one here.
Oh
Chris.
wait, the last
Chris,
one.
you're just playing with the box.
I've got too many things.
Playing with the box. That's not a present. I know it's fun. I know the box is fun, but it's not a present.
It's all got my name on it and everything. It's very exciting. Oh, I mean, this is so thoughtful. We've talked about this on the show. The Monocle Book of Designers on Sofa.
Signed copy as well, so at a premium.
Oh,
it's going to be worth a lot of money one day.
It is going to be worth a lot of money. We've talked about this on the show. It's a wonderful product, I will say.
Can I plug it,
Nick? Of course you can plug it. Once again,
it's the latest publication from Monocle Books, and the whole idea is that we went into the homes of 50 architects and designers across the globe, examined their relationship with the sofa, and it's about so much more than just a piece of furniture. It's about the relationships that are built up on them and develop over time on them, and the beautiful patina of life that plays out on them. And it's got amazing photography, brilliant essays on the history of the sofa, and I think it's a perfect gift for design enthusiasts. And also, would you describe yourself as a design enthusiast, Chris?
Sure. Whenever I talk to you, I'm a design enthusiast.
Also for anyone. I think it's just it's a book about design, but it's also about people, and I think that's what's so wonderful about it.
You've put me in a real bind here, guys, because I feel like now I have to pick the Monocle one as my choice, given that it's a Monocle product, and yet Mockapot is calling me, I have to say.
Well, I'll walk away with the wristwatch then, and that's I'm quite happy with that. You can have the signed book.
But it's fine.
Has final thoughts from you? Has it been fun producing Monocle on Design?
It's been very fun, and I think it's only set to get more fun in 2026.
I think so. That felt like a performance review on air.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. High risk, high reward. Hassan Anderson and Nick Manise, thank you so much for joining us today. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Anita Riota. Our researcher was Joanna Moser, and our studio manager was Lily Austin. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.